Hello, Year Threes. Now, we left yesterday with them entering the crumbling tunnel. Are they going to make it? We're going to read chapter 25 and 26 today because they are really short chapters. And I really want to know what's going to happen next. So, chapter 25, Bad News Travels Fast. Are you all ready? Captain Neoma surveyed her platoon. She had assembled 12 of her most capable guards in the briefing bunker outside the observatory, and they all stood to rigid attention, their plate armour polished, their plasma rifles charged and ready. Yes, Captain, they chorused. I won't lie to you, she said. This is a dangerous mission against a powerful foe. We'll be outnumbered, but we'll have the element of surprise, and we need to use it to our advantage. In and out quickly, grab the snow globe and go. Do I make myself clear? Yes, Captain. One side of Neoma's mouth curled in a satisfied little smile. It certainly beats babysitting, am I right? She saw the smile reflected in the other women's faces. After all the intrigue and uncertainty, it felt good to be on the brink of a proper fight again. Then why are you all standing here? She said. Let's move out. She turned to lead them out of the bunker, only to find Lord Meridian standing in the doorway. I'm afraid that won't be necessary, Captain, he said. We no longer need to worry about the snow globe falling into the wrong hands, or any hands come to that. My lord? Captain Neoma could already feel her pent-up excitement turning to agitation. From the shuffling of feet behind her, the guards felt the same. Why not? Because he's been destroyed, along with the Impossible Postal Express and its crew. He gave a resigned shrug. It's a shame, I suppose. I had been rather looking forward to meeting them. Neoma's excitement nosedived, straight through agitation and into dejection. As much as she had grown to dislike the little brat Frederick in his absence, she hadn't wanted to see him dead. But Lord Meridian already seemed to have moved on. There's no need to put off recruiting a replacement any more, he said. We can't afford to let the project fall behind. Have someone start canvassing the better schools in the Western Fenlands, would you? But, my lord, said Neoma, what about Crepuscula? What about her? He said. She's got no prize left to fight for. She'll return to the Obsidian Tower and sulk. He chuckled at the thought. Now, if you wouldn't mind, I'd like you to all get back to your posts, please. At a nod from Neoma, the guards trooped out, but with a fraction of their former enthusiasm. She followed them, trying to ignore her own disappointment. Not only had she been denied a fair fight with Crepuscula, but she would never really know why Frederick had fled the observatory. She had been counting on him for some answers. Chapter 26, Blast Off. The gargoyle set Crepuscula down in front of the row of tunnels, and then launched itself back into the air with a snap of its wings. Crepuscula watched with resignation as the last of the broken tunnel mouth fell in. The flickering blackness flared bright purple for a second. There was a sudden inrush of air that sucked in clouds of dust like a huge vacuum cleaner, and then with an anticlimactic fizz, the light was gone, leaving just the bare rock of the cliff face inside the shattered arch. She was still standing there a minute later when, with a pounding of granite feet, the statues finally caught up with her. Having no breath to be short of, they simply stood and waited, following her half-vacant gaze and awaiting new orders. None came. She didn't even seem to notice their arrival. What have you done? Finally jogged out of the reverie, she looked around into the scowling features of Fletch. Unlike the statues, he was very much out of breath, red-faced and sweating from the long run from the post office. He braced his hands on his knees and pointed at the ruined tunnel mouth. You've killed them. Yes, almost certainly. There was no triumph in Crepuscula's voice. It's really quite unfortunate. Unfortunate? You brought the tunnel down on them. It's a death sentence. They were supposed to stop, she said, but it seems I miscalculated. You're a monster, he said, plunging his hands into his pockets and turning his back on her. And I'm sorry I ever set eyes on you. Do what you want, but I'm not helping you any more. Have it your way, she said, and he flinched again, expecting a blast of magic to strike him in the back any second. When he looked around, that she was still watching the tunnel mouth, as though expecting it to do something. Evil old witch, he muttered to himself, as he stalked quickly away. If there were any justice, she'd have gone in with them, he sniffed, and so would I, fool I am. His hands were shaking from shock and anger and grief, but he refused to let any of it show while he was still in sight of her. He had only gone a little way, picking his way along the tracks back towards the centre of town, when he heard her speak again. "Boys, I want you to run along to the ivory tower and see if our friends on the train made it through. I'm not expecting good news, but it's better than not knowing." She clapped her hands, and the statues took off at a run, each heading for a different tunnel. Fletch watched them go with a mixture of awe and disgust. No living thing would ever dare set foot in a tunnel without a vehicle to see them safely through, but he supposed the statues were made of stronger stuff. "No respect for the dead," he spat, "or anyone else." But watching the statues vanish into the tunnel stirred something else in him as well. It wasn't hope. He knew better than to hope for the impossible, but it felt a bit like it. It was adjacent to hope. It was uncertainty in the face of insurmountable facts. Stonker Ursel and the girl couldn't have survived the cave-in. It was impossible. And yet Crepuscula had her doubts, small though they might be. Enough doubts to send her army through to finish the job in case it needed finishing. Which it didn't. It couldn't. Could it? He had wandered as far as the HEC and the sorting carriage, which stood abandoned on the main line, where they had come to rest after being uncoupled from the Belle de Lorraine. They were all that remained of the impossible postal express. He rested a hand against the pitted iron hull of the HEC. It still trembled with life, thanks to the myriad of machines inside it. He had worked on a few of them himself, machines to go anywhere, from the depths of the oceans to the furthest reaches of space. And just like that, he knew what he had to do. Crepuscula turned from the tunnels when a sudden flash of light temporarily lit Trollville like a second sun. She shielded her eyes from the glare and from the clouds of dust that billowed into the air. Beyond her remaining guard of statues, somewhere down the train tracks, the HEC lifted into the air on a column of fire. It rose slowly at first, but gathered speed with an ear-splitting roar until it was a vanishing speck in the tan sky. "What's that disagreeable creature doing now?" Crepuscula said. "These trolls always find the most ridiculous means of hurling themselves about." She traced the capsule's trajectory until it disappeared from her sight completely. Then she turned back to the tunnels and waited. Fletch sat at the HEC's control panel and allowed himself a smile as the carriage rocked through the cloud layer into the clear blue sky. He hadn't been sure that the old crate would even make it off the chassis, but it had been so long since it had been flown, but everything was working as though it had been built yesterday. "Made to last," he said, giving the panel an affectionate stroke. "Of course, they say the landing is the tricky bit." He craned his neck, fighting against the G-force that pinned him to the seat, and looked out of the starboard porthole. The curvature of the world was visible outside, and the blue sky was darkening to black as he left the atmosphere behind. His body relaxed a little as the G-forces began to slacken, and the gravity released its hold on him. Soon he would be completely weightless. "Good thing I skipped breakfast," he mused, making sure his seatbelt was secured. He made a few course adjustments and brought the HEC's nose around. Over the rim of the horizon, the moon was just rising. And that brings us to the end of Chapter 6, Year 3s.